Hey everyone, and welcome to another deep dive.
All right.
This time we're taking a look at ADAM-1, AI and bioinformatics for Alzheimer's detection and microbiome clinical data integrations.
Sounds intriguing.
It is.
Yeah.
So this paper really caught my eye because it's tackling like a really, really tough problem in Alzheimer's research.
Absolutely.
You know, it's like we have so much data now.
Yeah.
Like we have clinical records, we have brain scans, we even have this information about the gut microbiome.
Right.
But like putting it all together to understand and predict Alzheimer's has been super hard.
It's been a huge challenge for the field.
Yeah, it's like trying to solve this like crazy complex puzzle.
Right.
But like some of the pieces are missing. You know?
Exactly. And the pieces we do have don't always seem to fit together.
Right. Yeah. And so like how do you even begin to solve that puzzle?
And that's where ADAM-1 comes in.
That's where ADAM-1 comes in.
This framework offers a really new and I think promising approach.
What is ADAM-1?
So at its core, it's what we call a multi-agent system, which means it uses multiple AI agents. And these agents, they specialize in different tasks.
It was like a team.
Exactly like a team of experts, each with their own unique skills.
Okay, so who are these agents?
Well, you've got the biostatistics ML agent. It's kind of like the data cruncher, the one that sifts through all the raw data, finds the patterns, and identifies anything statistically significant.
Okay, so like the data scientist of the group.
Yeah, exactly, the data scientist.
Okay, cool.
Then you've got the summarization agent.
Okay.
This one takes all these complex findings that the data scientist comes up with and distills them into like a digestible report.
So like the science communicator.
Exactly, the science communicator, the one who can explain it in a way that everyone can understand.
I like that.
And then finally, you've got the classification agent.
Okay.
Now, this is the one that makes the final call. It takes the insights from the other two agents, considers all the evidence, and then says, you know what, this individual, they likely have Alzheimer's or they don't.
So like the expert diagnostician.
Exactly. It's like having a whole research team packed into one AI system.
I love that analogy.
Yeah.
It really helps kind of understand how it all works together.
Right. It's this collaboration, this teamwork.
And they're all specialized.
Exactly. Each one brings their own expertise to the table.
That's really cool.
Now, there's another thing that makes ADAM-1 even more interesting.
Okay.
It's not just crunching the data you feed it.
Okay.
It actually goes a step further and uses something called retrieval augmented generation.
Retrieval augmented generation.
Yeah. Try saying that 3 times fast.
I am not going to try and do that.
Physically, imagine the AI having access to this massive library of scientific papers on Alzheimer's.
Right.
So it can actually pull relevant information from these external sources to support its analysis.
That's pretty amazing.
It is. It's like giving the AI
a
superpower.
Right. So it's not limited to like just the data you're giving it. It can go and find more information.
Exactly. It can tap into this vast body of knowledge.
That's incredible.
Which makes its predictions more reliable and insightful.
Way more reliable.
Yeah.
Especially if it's like finding conflicting information, it can like maybe weight it differently or...
Exactly. It can weigh the evidence, consider different perspectives, and ultimately make a more informed decision.
That's really neat.
So you mentioned earlier that this paper kind of caught your eye because it was tackling a tough problem.
Yes.
And one of the things they highlighted was its ability to work with smaller data sets.
Yes.
Which is really important for research labs.
Especially for research labs.
Right, because they don't always have access to these huge amounts of data.
Right.
And what I found really intriguing was the connection they make between the gut microbiome and Alzheimer's.
Yes, me too. That was one of the things that I really wanted to talk about. Because it's like kind of a newer area of research.
It is. It's a hot topic right now.
Yeah.
For a long time, the focus was solely on the brain.
Right.
When we were studying Alzheimer's.
Yeah.
But now we're starting to realize that there's this really intricate connection between the gut and the brain.
Yeah, it's wild.
Yeah.
What's going on in your gut can actually influence...
It can have a huge impact...
your brain.
On brain health.
Yeah, and potentially play a role in, developing Alzheimer's or not.
Exactly. And this paper really dives into that.
So what did they find?
Well, they looked at the types and diversity of bacteria in the gut.
Okay.
And they found a strong link between specific gut bacteria and Alzheimer's.
Okay.
They even identified like the top 10 most abundant bacterial species in their data set.
Okay.
And they analyzed something called alpha and beta diversity.
So, okay.
Yeah.
Alpha and beta diversity.
Let me break this down for you
Yeah, please.
because they can be a little bit confusing.
Yeah, I was going to ask.
So alpha diversity, think of that as the number of different species in a single sample.
Okay, so like in one person's gut microbiome,
Exactly.
how many different species are there?
Exactly. So if you have a lot of different species, that's high alpha diversity.
Okay.
If you have just a few, that's low alpha diversity.
Okay.
Now, beta diversity measures how different those species compositions are between samples.
Like me and you.
Yeah, exactly.
How different are our microbiomes?
Exactly. So if our microbiomes are very similar,
Okay.
that's low beta diversity.
Okay.
If they're very different,
That's high beta diversity.
that's high beta diversity.
Yeah.
So you can kind of think of it like different forests.
Okay.
So a forest with lots of different types of trees,
High alpha diversity.
high alpha diversity.
Okay.
Now, if you have two forests and they have completely different trees,
High beta diversity.
high beta diversity.
God.
So in the context of Alzheimer's,
Okay.
they found that individuals with Alzheimer's tend to have lower alpha diversity and higher beta diversity
Interesting.
compared to healthy individuals.
So their gut microbiomes are less diverse overall and more different from each other
Exactly.
than people without Alzheimer's.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So by looking at these bacterial profiles and their diversity, ADAM-1 can get a better picture
Okay.
of individuals' Alzheimer's risk.
So it's like another piece of the puzzle.
Exactly. It's another clue
Okay.
that helps the AI make a more accurate prediction.
That's cool.
And what makes this paper even more noteworthy is that it shows that integrating this gut microbiome data can significantly improve the accuracy of Alzheimer's prediction.
Wow.
Even with those smaller data sets that we talked about earlier.
And now we kind of get back to like the multi-agent system thing.
Exactly. We've talked about the data.
Right.
We talked about the gut microbiome. Now let's go back to
how it all comes together.
How it all comes together in this really unique way.
Yeah. So remind us again.
Okay, so we have these three agents, remember?
Yeah.
The biostatistics ML agent.
The data scientist.
The data scientist.
Okay.
The summarization agent.
Science communicator.
The science communicator.
And the classification agent.
The expert diagnostician.
Okay, cool. Just want to make sure.
Yeah.
So how do they work together?
It's like a relay race.
Okay.
First up, you have the biostatistics ML agent sifting through all that raw data.
Right, crunching those numbers.
Crunching the numbers, identifying the statistically significant patterns.
So they hand off the baton.
They hand off the baton
to the summarization agent.
Exactly.
And they take those like really complex findings.
Yeah, all those numbers and equations, and they're like, okay, how do we explain this in a way that everyone can understand?
Right, right. Even me.
Even you!
Okay, good.
So they create this clear, concise report.
Right.
Highlighting the key takeaways. And then they pass the baton
to the classification agent.
To the classification agent.
Who's like
the anchor leg.
Yeah.
They take the insights from the other two agents, combine them with all that external knowledge
that they've retrieved
from the scientific literature, and then they make that final judgment call.
Yeah. Does this person
likely have Alzheimer's or not?
Okay. And so it's like they're all working together, but they're all kind of doing their own little part.
Exactly. Each one has their own specialized role.
That's really cool.
And by working together, they can create something much more powerful.
Yeah. And efficient than if
one agent
was doing all of it.
Was trying to do it all.
Right.
Right? It's the power of teamwork.
I love it.
Yeah.
So it's not just spitting out a prediction.
Right.
It's providing like a clear rationale.
Exactly. It's explaining its reasoning.
Okay.
Which makes its findings so much more valuable.
Right. Because you can understand like the why. And then you can kind of go back and be like, okay, well, let's look at these factors more closely.
Right. Is this something we can potentially intervene on?
Right.
Is this something we can modify to maybe reduce the risk?
Exactly.
So it's not just about making a prediction, it's about understanding the underlying mechanisms.
Right, and like driving further research.
Exactly. It's about giving researchers the tools they need to really make progress in this field.
So, okay, we've established that ADAM-1 is like super innovative.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
And it uses this like multi-agent system, and it's got all these really cool features. But how does it actually perform?
That's the million-dollar question, right?
Right, like does it actually work?
Well, they put it to the test.
They did.
They did.
Okay, good. Because if they didn't, I'd be like, what are we even talking about?
Right. What's the point?
Yeah, so what'd they do?
So they compared ADAM-1's performance to XGBoost.
XGBoost.
which is a more traditional
Yeah.
machine learning model.
And XGBoost is like pretty good.
It's a solid performer.
It's like the benchmark.
Yeah, often used as a benchmark.
Okay, so they're comparing it against like
Yeah,
the
the tried and true method.
Okay.
So they wanted to see, okay, how does this new fancy
Right.
ADAM-1 stack up?
Yeah, how does it actually compare?
And here's where it gets interesting.
Okay.
When they compared the average accuracy of the two models
Okay.
using a statistical test
Okay.
called a t-test,
T-test.
there wasn't a significant difference.
So round one
Round one
is a tie.
is a tie.
Okay, but you said it gets interesting.
But I said it gets interesting.
So there must be more.
There's more to the story.
Okay, what else did they do?
They also used an F-test
An F-test. Okay.
to compare the variance.
Okay, so variance.
Variance is basically how much the predictions fluctuate.
Fluctuate. So like,
Yeah.
how different are the predictions each time you run it?
Well, exactly. So if the variance is high,
Okay.
it means that the predictions are kind of all over the place,
Okay.
not very consistent.
Right.
If the variance is low,
Okay.
it means that the predictions are pretty much the same.
So it's more reliable.
It's more reliable, it's more consistent.
Okay.
And guess what?
What?
ADAM-1 had significantly lower variance
Then XGBoost.
than XGBoost.
So even though their average accuracy was about the same,
Yeah.
ADAM-1 was more consistent.
ADAM-1 was way more consistent.
Wow.
Its predictions were much more reliable.
Okay, that's a big deal.
That is a big deal.
Especially when we're talking about something as sensitive as like Alzheimer's diagnosis.
Absolutely. You want a test.
Yeah.
That's going to give you the same answer
Right.
every time.
You don't want it to be like, oh, well,
Right.
this time it said this and this time it said that.
Exactly. You want consistency.
You want reliability.
You want reliability.
Especially with something as important as medical diagnosis.
Exactly.
Okay, so we know it performs well,
Yeah, it's looking pretty good so far.
but I'm sure there are some limitations.
There are always limitations.
Right, nothing's perfect.
No research is perfect.
So what are some of the limitations that they pointed out?
Well, one of the biggest ones is that ADAM-1,
Yeah.
in its current form,
Okay.
only uses microbiome and clinical data.
Okay.
And while that's a great start,
Yeah.
imagine the possibilities if we could incorporate other data types as well.
Right. Like what kind of other data?
Well, we've got brain imaging data from MRI scans.
Right.
We have genetic information.
Mm-hmm.
We even have audio data from speech patterns.
Oh, wow.
All of these things could provide valuable insights
Yeah.
into the complexities of Alzheimer's.
And if you could put all that together,
Exactly.
then you could really have like a more comprehensive,
A more holistic view
yeah,
of disease.
and potentially even more accurate predictions.
And potentially even more personalized predictions.
Like tailored to each individual.
And-
So it's like ADAM-1 has laid this like
Yeah.
really solid foundation.
It's a great proof of concept.
Yeah.
It shows that this approach works,
Right.
but now it's time to kind of build on that foundation.
Right. And expand it.
Expand it, add more data sources.
More pieces to the puzzle.
More pieces to the puzzle.
That's cool. And did they mention
They didn't.
any like future research directions?
They did. They hinted at a few things in the paper.
Okay, like what?
Well, they talked about integrating external databases.
Okay.
So not just the scientific literature, but other databases that might have relevant information.
Right.
They also talked about exploring the role of the oral microbiome.
The oral microbiome. That's interesting.
Yeah, so not just the gut microbiome,
Right.
but the bacteria in our mouths
Yeah.
could also play a role.
Wow. So there's like
There's so much more to explore.
even more to the microbiome than just the gut.
Exactly.
That's fascinating.
We're just scratching the surface of
Yeah.
what we can.
It seems like with every deep dive,
Right.
there's like a million more questions
It's true.
that come up,
Yeah.
which is great.
It's what keeps research exciting.
Yeah.
It's what keeps us moving forward.
It keeps us going.
Exactly.
I love it. Okay. So before we get too carried away with all the
Okay.
possibilities,
Right.
let's move on to our novel notions segment,
All right.
where we kind of explore
Yeah.
some thought-provoking ideas
Some what ifs.
inspired by this research.
Let's get those creative juices flowing.
I like it.
So for novel notions today, let's think really big picture.
Okay. I'm ready.
We've seen what ADAM-1 can do with the gut microbiome data and clinical information.
Right.
But what if we took that even further?
Like how much further can we take?
Well, imagine a future where we have these AI models,
Okay.
kind of like ADAM-1,
Uh-huh.
but way more powerful.
Yeah.
And they're trained on just mountains of data.
Mountains of data.
Not just microbiome and clinical data, but brain imaging, genetic information, lifestyle factors.
Wow.
Maybe even data from wearable sensors. you know?
Like sleep and activity.
Exactly. Sleep patterns, activity levels.
Okay, so we're talking like a treasure trove of information.
A treasure trove.
Okay.
And with all that data,
Yeah.
what if this AI could predict someone's risk of Alzheimer's
Okay.
decades in advance?
Decades in advance.
Decades.
That's a long time.
It is.
Like we're talking
30, 40 years before any symptoms even appear.
That's mind-blowing.
It is.
And a little bit scary.
Yeah, there's definitely a wow factor.
Yeah.
But also some ethical considerations.
Right, because like if you knew
Exactly.
that you were at high risk for Alzheimer's, like that could really weigh on you.
It could be incredibly stressful.
Yeah.
It could change how you live your life,
Right.
your choices, your outlook on everything.
And what if it was wrong?
That's another big question.
Right.
What if the prediction was inaccurate?
Yeah.
What if you spent your whole life worrying about something that was never going to happen?
Or the opposite.
Or the opposite.
Like, what if you were told you were low risk and then you develop it
Exactly.
and you're like, but I was told.
I was given a clean bill of health.
Right.
It's a double-edged sword.
It is. So there's like.
There are a lot of ethical implications here.
Yeah.
We need to think about things like informed consent.
Right. Like, would everyone want to know?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Some people might say, absolutely, I want to know.
Right.
I want to be prepared.
Yeah.
Others might say, no, I'd rather not know.
Right.
I don't want that hanging over my head.
Yeah.
And then there's the issue of discrimination.
Right. Like, what if insurance companies get a hold of this information?
What if employers start using it to make hiring decisions?
It's scary.
It's a slippery slope.
It is.
So we need to be really careful about how this technology is developed and used.
Right. We need to have these conversations now, like before it's too late.
Before this technology gets ahead of us.
Yeah.
We need to establish clear guidelines, ethical frameworks.
To make sure it's used responsibly.
Responsibly and ethically.
And for the benefit of everyone.
For the benefit of humanity.
Yeah. Not just like for profit.
Exactly.
So it's like this whole Pandora's box.
It is.
Of possibilities.
And challenges.
Right.
It's exciting and terrifying at the same time.
But I think it's important to talk about it.
Absolutely. We need to have these conversations and bring these issues to light.
And before we get too carried away,
right.
I just want to remind everyone that this is all hypothetical.
Right. This is a thought experiment.
We're just exploring ideas here.
We're pushing the boundaries of what's possible.
Right. But it's based on real research.
It is grounded in science.
Yeah. So it's not just like completely out there.
It's not science fiction.
Right.
It's a glimpse into what the future might hold.
And I think that's what makes it so fascinating.
It's thought-provoking, it's challenging, it's inspiring.
It's all of those things.
Yeah.
And it's important to think about
absolutely
where we're headed.
Because the future is coming, whether we're ready for it or not.
And we can help shape that future.
You can be active participants.
Through these conversations.
Research, through ethical consideration.
Yeah, so it's not just up to the scientists.
It's up to all of us
to
decide what kind of future we want to create.
Wow, what a deep dive that was.
Yeah, a lot to unpack there.
So much.
With ADAM-1.
I think one of the things that I keep coming back to is just how cool it is that it can like integrate all that external knowledge from those scientific publications.
Right. It's not just like working in a vacuum.
Right. It's actually learning.
It's learning from a vast body of research, which is incredible.
It's like it's constantly reading all those papers.
Staying up to date on the latest findings.
Yeah, like a superpowered research assistant.
That's a great way to put it.
And it can connect the dots.
Yeah.
Between all that data and all that existing knowledge.
Right. It's seeing the big picture.
Yeah.
Which is something that traditional AI models have really struggled with.
Right. They're kind of like stuck in their own little world.
Exactly. They're limited to the data they're given.
And that's why like this is such a big deal.
It is. It's a game changer.
Because it's not just making predictions. It's explaining why.
It's providing the rationale.
That's huge.
It's huge for building trust.
Yeah.
Especially in healthcare.
Right. Because you don't want to just blindly trust AI.
Especially when it comes to something as sensitive as a medical diagnosis.
Right.
You want to know why it's making that prediction?
Yeah. What's the evidence?
What are the factors that are contributing to that decision?
And ADAM-1 gives you that.
It does. It lays it all out there.
So you can really understand what's going on.
It's like having a conversation with the AI.
That's cool.
Asking it questions, getting those explanations.
Yeah, and then you can kind of dig deeper into those factors.
You can validate the results.
Yeah.
You can maybe even identify new avenues for research.
Exactly.
So it's not just about making a prediction, it's about advancing our understanding of the disease.
And I think it's worth mentioning again that they were able to achieve these results with a relatively small data set.
Yeah, they weren't working with millions of samples.
Which is really impressive.
It shows the potential of this approach.
So imagine what could happen if we had like mountains of data.
What if we could train ADAM-1 on massive data sets with all those different data types we talked about earlier?
The brain imaging, the genetics, the lifestyle factors.
Just everything. The possibilities are endless.
We could move beyond just predicting Alzheimer's status. We could maybe even identify the earliest warning signs. Like decades before any symptoms appear.
Early intervention. Personalized prevention strategies.
Yeah, maybe even new therapeutic targets.
Exactly.
It's like we could potentially change the course of this disease.
That's the ultimate goal.
And that's what makes this research so exciting.
It gives us hope.
It does.
That maybe one day
yeah,
we can beat Alzheimer's.
That's a future I want to be a part of.
I think we all do.
And I think that's a great place to wrap up.
I agree.
This deep dive.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us, everyone.
And keep those brains buzzing.
Until next time.